Welcome to the Geek, the History Geek. I'm Mr. Hodges. History often presents some very interesting circumstances that make up many historical events. Sometimes these circumstances may seem, very hard to believe. However, even you may have met someone that seems to have strange luck that seems to follow them regardless of whatever they try to do. Stay with me as we learn about the fantastic story of Wilmer McClean and how he and his family would be caught up in historical events. Time to suit up. Yeah, wow, I love that. Whew. Wilmer McClean was a native of Alexandria, Virginia, a small town across the Potomac River from Washington, D.C. Now, as a young man, he served with the local Virginia militia unit during the Mexican War and eventually retired from service in that militia unit as a major. Now, Mr. McLean was very well educated and he worked in the wholesale retail grocery business and was quite successful. For all of these reasons, he was, quite the catch when he finally began to court and eventually married Virginia Mason in 1853. Now, she was a wealthy widow with 3 children from her previous marriage and had around 2,000 acres of land in 2 different counties in Virginia and 14 slaves. Now, the couple decided to move to his wife's small 1,200-acre plantation called Yorkshire, located near Manassas Junction. Wilmer would give up his business to become a gentleman farmer and to run all aspects of the plantation. This is when historical fate would take its first turn. By the time of the start of the Civil War, Mr. McLean was too old to be conscripted or to fight. However, he had something that would play an important role in the early war. Manassas Junction was a major rail junction for rail lines coming into northern Virginia and therefore an important place to hold to prevent Union forces from advancing away from Washington, D.C. and further into Virginia. As a loyal Virginian, he would allow Confederate forces to take control of the plantation, and they would use the house as a headquarters and the barn as a hospital and also a jail. On July 21st, 1863, the Battle of Bull Run began adjacent to and on the land owned by the McLean family. Now, Edward Porter Alexander, a Confederate artillery officer, reported that one of the first shots of the battle struck the McLean house's kitchen. The Union artillery shell was directed towards the Confederate headquarters, but proceeded to strike the kitchen, penetrating the walls, and actually ruined the meal that was being prepared inside by covering it with flying debris. No one was injured, of course. Fate was not yet done, though, with the McLean family. A little over a year later, the second battle was fought there at Manassas Junction, and Wilbur and his pregnant wife, Virginia, had had enough. They began looking for a safe place to raise their soon-to-be-born baby and their 3 other children. They began searching for a place that would be out of the path of war. Someplace quiet. The family finally settled on some property surrounding the Two Rain Tavern on the Richmond-Lynchburg Stage Road, located at a small, quiet crossroads in southern Virginia, well over 100 miles south of where the battles were going on. For over a year and a half, they lived in relative quiet of southern Virginia. However, fate would come calling once again. Now, as April 1865 began, the Confederate Army was still locked in a siege at Petersburg, Virginia, against Union forces there. However, following the defeats at Five Forks on April 1st and the significant fighting on April 2nd that gave Grant access to the Appomattox River and the ability to threaten the Army of Northern Virginia on the northern side of the river, General Robert E. Lee knew that he would have to retreat or his army would soon be trapped there and destroyed. He rapidly moved his army west in an attempt to secure provisions to save his army, and after the defeat at Sailor's Creek and the loss of the Confederate food stores at Farmville, it was apparent that the end was closing in. On April 8th, Sheridan's forces engaged Confederate artillery near Appomattox, where they captured 25 guns and destroyed an important supply train. Lee and the Army of Northern Virginia was trapped and forced to fight on the morning of April 9th, 1865. The outcome of the battle forced Lee to realize that the end had finally come. Despite his best efforts to find safety for his family, once again the war had come calling on Wilmer McClean and his family. His quiet crossroads where he lived was Appomattox. But that is not the end of the story. Charles Marshall, an aide of General Lee, asked McLean to show him a place that would be suitable for General Lee and another general to meet. Mr. McLean would eventually offer the parlor of his home for the meeting. General Robert E. Lee would surrender the Army of Northern Virginia to General Grant and the Union forces in that very parlor. It was there that the end of the Civil War had begun. It is hard for us to believe how history and fate could be so intertwined with one man and his family. But for Wilmer McLean, it can be said that the Civil War in Virginia started in his backyard, well, his kitchen, and ended in his parlor. Well, that's all for this Did You Know? I am Mr. Hodges, and this is the History Geek. And be sure to click subscribe and ring the bell to be notified of more videos. Have a great day.